Ty, welcome back to the Hardwood Knocks podcast. I normally only pester you once a year for a Bucks look ahead, but how could I not pester you, given what's happening with Bucks Celtics in the semifinals? Before we dig into all things that have been this epically ridiculous series between these two teams, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing well. As I said, we do these playback live streams, so it's kind of like Twitch, like we're on the screen talking about the game. As I said at some point during Game Five, which we were live for, time to see how my happiness over the next 48 hours is going to be in that fourth quarter, and it's good. It's good. The Bucks won. It's not always like that every game or even every playoff game, but certainly one of that magnitude. It was going to affect the mood a little bit, and you wake up feeling a lot better when the Bucks, Giannis, Jrue, Bobby, Pat. I mean, you can name a lot of guys who I think were really great in that game in their own ways. But all that to say, I'm doing well. Thank you, Dan, for having me on the Hardwood Knocks podcast. I'm honored.
Oh, please. We love having you around these parts. I guess, we're coming off of just what was a wild game five. That fourth quarter, just like there are so many just mind melting things that happened between Drew's Holiday's defense. I mentioned to you before we started, I find it incredible that even with the Bucks' defensive adjustments, the Celtics took 0 3-pointers during the quarter. What have you just made of this series, though, in general through the first five games?
Yeah, I think honestly, the story of this series has been like who can figure out a way to score. Because I think it's two great defenses, and we've had conversations on the pod like, are the Celtics a great team or a very good team? I think the conclusion we've came to is they are a great defense, but a very good team because of their limitations on the other end. And I think the Bucks deal with a lot of the same limitations, especially without Khris Middleton. So this series to me, and the scores have gone up as we've gone farther. I think some of that is these guys are just getting tired of playing this level of defense and trying to contain Giannis on one end, Tatum on the other, and all the other guys as well. But I think really it's who can squeeze out some points. So for the Bucks, that was taking advantage of turnovers big time in game five and knocking down some threes. And two guys who, aren't known as great knockdown shooters, but had been unseasonably bad in the playoffs. And Giannis and Jrue both hit threes late. Pat Connaughton continues to pour them in. Wesley Matthews is hitting threes. Like, those are the differences. I mean, Tatum, outside of the two games where he was really very limited, has scored like, high 20s, 30s, something like that. Giannis now is doing the same. Seems like he is kind of just worn down Al Horford to an extent, although Horford's still doing a good job. He's figuring out the Celtics defense as we go, but it's like who can get points around their star or stars. Jaylen Brown's been quite good too. And the Bucks with some timely shooting and some transition, they figured it out and stole the win because of it.
Yeah, what's interesting is that everything Boston did well through the first three quarters or whatever it was completely just flipped in the fourth quarter. Milwaukee beat them in transition. They scored most of their points off turnovers in the fourth quarters. They got seven of their 17 offensive rebounds in that fourth quarter. It was just like, it was an epic collapse because like seldom do you see like such a comprehensive implosion. It was just at every single level of the game. And I do think you need to credit Milwaukee, who played fantastic defense. I think Wes Matthews and Pat Connaughton have been like two of just the undersung heroes in this series. I mean, and Wes Matthews too, just like playing all these minutes at the age of 80 or whatever he is at this point. So that's just been interesting to watch. I wonder if, you mentioned Giannis sort of figuring out Al Horford, and I'm kind of with you. The Bucks offense can still be frustrating at points where they set a ball screen for Giannis, but then there's not really anything going on after the ball screen. He's just at the top of the key and he's going after who's ever in front of him. He's been able to get by Al Horford. And then, your co-host, I think it was Rowan, mentioned like he's been using his angles a lot better. And I totally agree. I'm wondering how much it has to do with Robert Williams, the third, not being in the series anymore to be behind those plays. Giannis, through the first two games, only took 10 shots when Al Horford was on the court. And he was 5 of 10, but only 10 shots. And a lot of those minutes are coming with Time Lord. He has taken many more shots since Time Lord went down, and he's shooting like 60% from two in those things. And so do you think that I'm with you in the sense that Milwaukee and Boston face some of the same offensive struggles, and I don't think we can say, oh, the Bucks offense has figured it out. But it feels like Giannis might have figured out how to attack the Celtics, at least as they're currently constituted without Robert Williams III there.
Yeah, I think he kind of does this to everyone. I think that was what changed last postseason is he figured out something. He figured out more counters, and his will has always been unrelenting. But I think he's figured out a couple more, added a couple tricks to the apparently small bag to get by these defenses. But I do think Robert Williams would change things. I don't know if Boston would close with him because I think the issue there for the Celtics, while I do agree, I think I've seen this narrative that it's good for Boston and he's not playing. That's stupid. He's a good player. They don't have a ton of good players, although their bench was excellent. They somehow won Daniel Theis minutes convincingly, which drove us crazy watching the game. But Robert Williams would certainly help Boston. But I do think what is good for the Bucks about his minutes is those are very comfortable Brook Lopez minutes. Since he's gone out, Lopez has not had as much of an impact on either direction because essentially Boston is always 5 out. I mean, even Theis is what made a three and can shoot threes to an extent. Whereas Robert Williams, that jumper, the mid-range jumper for him has looked quite good this series. And it's probably like 3 attempts. I'm a sicko because I buy into stuff like that. But he's made a couple that I was like, oh, I didn't know he could do that. But Lopez is a lot more comfortable hanging with him. So I think if he does go game 6 and plays a significant amount, I would expect it to be another lower scoring game. I think that's some of the reason the scoring has upticked over these last two, in addition to defenders just getting tired, is, less Brook Lopez. He played 20 minutes last night. They lost his minutes by a couple points. He hasn't been as effective on either end. I think if Time Lord is out there for 25 minutes, you can probably pencil in Brook Lopez for those 25 minutes, and then both teams' paint becomes a nightmare again. Like there's some similarities with how these two teams can function defensively, I think. And it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it'll be harder for Giannis, and then maybe even more importance on role players hitting threes. Thankfully, Pat Connaughton has stepped up in a big way when guys like Grayson Allen really have not. And just, again, it'll become like who can force more turnovers, who can get going in transition to beat these half-court defenses because they're both very thorny with those two centers down low.
What do you make of, there was the report, and you guys talked about this on the Gyro Step, that Khris Middleton could return for a game 6 or a game 7. Do you buy into that? And 2, would you even be in favor of it? And I think it's easy to be in favor of it because I guess this is me underestimating the Bucks, or maybe it's me overestimating how important Khris Middleton is to them. I thought the Celtics were going to win this series. I believe that Khris Middleton was that important to the Bucks' half-court offense. And I still think he is. I just underestimated, well, shit, Giannis exists and like his will be done sometimes. Like that's just what it feels like with him. But what do you make of that whole situation? Would you expect him to play in one of these 2 closeout games if there's even 2 of them? And would you even be in favor of that given the injury that he's coming back from?
Let me clarify. I think everyone probably knows, but I have no inside information. This is not reporting.
Aggregators.
Speculation. Aggregators, call them off. This is a useless take for you. I would expect him to play before the series ends, which is Rohan's take. I would love to see him play in game 6 with the obvious caveat, if he's truly ready to play, if it's safe for him to play. Even if it's safe for him to play, but he's going to be a little limited at first, I'd even like to see him then. I think a couple, like 15, 20 minutes. Again, player safety is the most important thing. They're up 3-2 without him. You obviously want him back. You don't want to take any game lightly in this series with how close it's been. But he would provide such a jolt. I mean, there's so many times. The funny thing about game 5 is it was kind of the just like carbon copy, but the opposite of game 4, where the Bucks held a lead at halftime, built a lead up in the third quarter, and then ended up just blowing it in the second half. The Celtics built their lead more in the fourth quarter, but still that reversal late. It's the same thing kind of happened to the Bucks in the Al Horford and Tatum explosion. And Marcus Smart had some big plays in there too. But I was thinking, and we talked about after that game, man, some of those runs when like the Bucks could not score, that's when you need Khris Middleton to just say, F it, I'm just going to shoot over a guy and, drain 3 possessions or 3 jumpers in 4 possessions, which is what he's done so many times in that championship run to just calm everybody down, kill the opposing momentum, all that stuff. They really do miss him a ton. I think he is very important. They're just like grinding out every other advantage they can find. I mean, you mentioned the offensive rebounds. That's a very Bucks thing. It's new for them to do so well without Brook Lopez on the court in that arena. And I think a lot of credit to Bobby Portis, who did not have a good shooting game, but really hustled on the boards, which has been big for him this season. But yeah, I think I would love to see him back for game 6. Again, you just don't want to do an unsafe thing. But I do think the way Bud talked about his status a couple games ago, I think it's certainly possible we see him at least before the end of the series, if not tomorrow or today, whenever people are listening.
I like that Bud said he's going to keep the starting five a state secret from now on, or whatever
They keep everything a state secret. It's funny the way he did it, but it's so everything has been so Bucks. The Khris Middleton injury update, yeah, he's doing all right. We'll let you know. That was it. That's great. Thanks for the update. Really appreciate it.
Their sports books are thrilled.
Oh yeah, they always are.
I'm with you. Presuming he can't do any further damage or he's fine and can play him. I don't know that I would want to see him in game 6. If he doesn't play game 6 and there's a game 7, I don't want to see him in that. Just because he hasn't played in so long, I do wonder if there would be something to the effect of, if he doesn't hurt you, does he even really help you? Is he someone the Boston could then target on defense, depending on how he's moving, what his stamina is like? And you have a little bit of a margin for error now because you have the 1 game cushion. So if you bring him back in game 6, if there is a game 7, or maybe he's just fresher for the second round, should you win. To your point, though, like even after game 5, the Jrue Holiday minutes without Giannis, the Bucks have been slaughtered. They've been outscored by 31 points in 40 minutes, and their approach probably needs to be, we're throwing the kitchen sink at you when Giannis isn't on the court, and that would be Khris Middleton and Jrue Holiday, and you could probably just, given who else is on their team, flesh out their roster from there. What have you made, though, of the offense when Giannis is off the court? Like, is that redeemable in any sense when you looked at how Jrue Holiday has played? And how big do you think it was that Jrue Holiday actually, he took, you and I were messaging about this. Some of the Jrue Holiday early shot clock jumpers were giving me heart palpitations. He closed the game really strong. How important do you think that might be for him offensively over the course of the rest of this series and the playoffs?
I think it's important for those closing situations, but I still think that the Bucks need to do a better job, and this mostly does come down to Jrue, of getting other players involved in the non-Giannis minutes. I think there's still too much of Jrue trying to do so much. And I think it's a valiant thing. I don't think it's selfishness. I think it's him it's him knowing we don't have Khris, Giannis is sitting, it's me and good players, but I am the star who's out here now. I need to carry this load. And I think it's probably better than him just completely deferring in those minutes, but there needs to be a better balance struck between I will take over and let's see what Grayson Allen can do if he's out there. And one of the things that drives me crazy is if you're going to play someone like Grayson, who the Celtics and Jaylen Brown especially are clearly enjoying finding on defense over and over ad nauseum.
Absolutely annihilated him in the fourth. It was almost mean what they were doing to Grayson Allen in the third quarter.
It was like there was just no resistance there. And that's just, I don't think he's a terrible defender, but if you're an okay defender, in those moments, you can function as a terrible defender. It's the issue. Bucks learned this with Bryn Forbes as well, who was worse, I think, than Grayson, but still. But I think they need to get Grayson involved on offense if he's going to be out there, because you're not playing him for his defense. So if he's shooting, let's see, 7 times over 30 minutes, only 2 of them threes. He did have 5 assists, so at least they got him, they got the ball moving through him more, which is nice. But I want to see more shots for him in those minutes, more shots for Pat Connaughton, who also only shot 7 times. Glad to see Bobby Portis take 14, only makes 4. Not an ideal game, but still at least wasn't completely holding up the offense. You'd rather shoot good looks and miss than just not shoot and stand around and watch someone else shoot. So they need better ball movement. They definitely need more of those guys taking shots. At one point, I think they ran Grayson Bobby Portis pick and roll that Portis scored on one of his 4 makes. And it was like, let's just do that like half the time when it's just Jrue out there. I mean, those are 2 good offensive players. There's a lot of shooting threat there. Get Bobby moving. I think they need to get all the big guys moving toward the rim more, even Brook, who I think that would help him score more in this series. But I definitely think he's still doing a little too much before crunch time. And they would be better off if they could get somebody else going. I mean, nobody besides Jrue and Giannis scores more than Portis' 14. They need a little bit more help from these other guys still, especially as we get later and later in this series, and Jrue and Giannis have done so much already.
When you're looking at how they match up with the Celtics and the different units that Boston has run out there, we don't really know, as we're recording this, if Robert Williams III is going to play in the next game. What do you view as sort of a tougher, structure of Boston's unit for Milwaukee to match up with, where they're going with Smart, Brown, Tatum, and White plus Horford, or when they're playing the Grant Williams and Al Horford together and, Derek White is probably on the bench in that scenario?
Honestly, it probably just depends on whichever of those two is playing better.
Okay.
It seems to me like I think theoretically the Grant Williams one is tougher for Milwaukee because that gives you have more than one guy you're comfortable guarding Giannis. I think it's much easier than, if you do get out of whack, if you're in semi-transition or whatever, you have two options who you're fairly comfortable guarding Giannis. So there's just more chance you'll be able to get one of those guys onto him versus if you're coming up and, semi-transition, everything's crazy, and Al Horford's on one side of the floor, Giannis is on the other, it gets a lot harder to then get him over there to guard him without giving up an open shot or something. So I think they're theoretically better with Grant Williams, but after his offensive explosion in game 2, whatever it was, maybe it was 4. No, whatever. I'm not going to
I think it was game 2. Games. Let me double check.
It's game 2.
What is time? Yeah. Everything blurs together.
I know. I do think it was game 2. Since then, though, it seems like Milwaukee's adjustment for him specifically was just nothing from the corners, and they've really cut down his corner threes. And I know his splits are pretty drastic. If you look at his three-point shooting from corners versus everywhere else, he's much more effective there. He seems less comfortable everywhere else. He's gotten some more like elbow threes in these last couple of games and hasn't really even wanted to shoot them. And I know I've read a couple reports about this from, I think like Keith Smith had one, that Ime Udoka has had huge problems with him, complaining to the officials and missing an assignment because of that. I think that's happened in multiple games now, which is playing into him playing less as well. And Derek White has played well. He's hit shots. He was not very good early. He's been better late. So I think if you're Boston, you probably just have to go with the guy who's helping you more actively right now in a series like this. But I do think the Celtics would be better off if it was Grant Williams who was giving you more, because that's just a much better Giannis option defensively, obviously, than Derek White is, as well as I think he's played on both ends over these last 2 games.
Yeah, and they went at Jaylen Brown a little bit with Giannis too in game 5. And so if you remove Grant Williams from the equation, does that theoretically give you 2 players that you're comfortable having Giannis attack against? And so I am with you there. I think offensively, though, at this point, because of how, and it was game 2, so we ended up being right on that, how disinvolved Grant Williams has been, it would probably almost behoove them to have Derek White, who's going to give you definitely more rim pressure, more of a connective passer, even when he's not scoring. So you might be losing some shooting with Grant Williams, but hey, you're not taking threes in the fourth quarter anymore anyway. So what do you need Grant Williams for? What is, and I know this depends on matchups, but so the Bucks closing the game with Giannis, Jrue, it was Connaughton, Portis, and Wes. Yeah. Is that like the ideal closing lineup for them where you don't see Brook on the court?
As long as Robert Williams isn't in, I think that probably is. The real question is the Portis spot, and I think he was really, his offense was not there in game 4, and Bud just slashed his minutes. I think he played like 15 minutes because he kept passing up wide open corner threes to like dribble in and then miss shots in the paint. And I think it drove Bud crazy and he just lost his minutes. He ends up playing near 28 and a half minutes in this game, despite not making a lot of shots. I think he made a bigger difference on the boards and took better shots again, even if they weren't falling for him. But I think Matthews and Connaughton, I think they're penned in there. Like they're not coming out of games in this series late. So if the Celtics are closing with Robert Williams, maybe you see Brook in there. I think Bobby right now would be the favorite. And again, we'll see what could possibly happen with Khris. I don't know if he would ever be able to close a game 6. That would be tremendous. But I think the Bucks don't like, now at this point in the series, Lopez out there against Horford as the 5, no matter if it's Grant Williams or someone else at the 4. It's just that the Celtics got too many looks from 3. Obviously, Horford burned them 2 games in a row, got the crazy win in game 4. So I don't expect to see Brook out there unless Robert Williams is. I would imagine Portis will be the favorite going in. If somebody like a George Hill, who has not played very well, or even a Grayson Allen has a really good game, then maybe. But I think the Bucks trust Portis more defensively than Grayson, and he gives you so much more on offense than Hill. So I would imagine that he gets the nod still.
Did you see anything in that fourth quarter of game 5 that you view as translatable to the future games of the Bucks, how they slowed down Boston's offense? Or was that more of Boston kind of slowing it down themselves and then Milwaukee scoring so they're able to just get their defense set and get back quicker? Or was there anything in particular? And even looking at the entire game, Al Horford had 7 shots after being supernova for this entire series. Was there anything specific you noticed about how they were covering him, or is that just another, the Celtics missing him on certain opportunities or not? it didn't feel like they were looking for him as much on like pick and pops as they've been throughout the previous 4 games.
Yeah, I think, I do think a little bit of that is as great as he looked and as much as he leaned into it game 4. Maybe it was only because of the Giannis stare down. That's what he seemed to say. I still don't think that's Al's preferred thing to do. But I also think the Bucks were like, we're not. I think their game plan for most of this series has been, we are only going to let you shoot threes that we want you to shoot. And they fell apart in their losses, especially. But I do think they're working more to toggle away some of those wide open threes. I think now it's like, if you're going to shoot threes, it's going to be like off the dribble around a screen, which Tatum was 2 for 11 on threes. He's had so many games that you just keep saying like, oh, he's not going to keep shooting like that. At some point, hopefully somebody gives the Bucks a bit of a nod for doing a hell of a job defending him. Not saying you're not, but I just keep like, this podcast does a great job of watching and analyzing both sides. I just see so much of like, oh, Tatum's going to get it together soon. Like, probably he will play better soon, but the Bucks are doing a tremendous job on Tatum, and they're just not giving guys like Grant Williams and in Game 5, Al Horford, those like really wide open, beautiful corner threes that you want. And I think that kind of coincides with Brook Lopez playing less and being less effective when he does play, because he's not dropped back as far anymore. The biggest drop, I think Giannis was dropping back really far at times in Game 5. And I didn't think it was a good idea. I don't think he should bother doing that when he's covering Al Horford, because you do tend to give him those shots. Although, again, he wasn't able to capitalize in this game. But, there's going to be some threes where a guy like Jaylen Brown will just hit a couple and right in the closeout's face. Guys like that hit shots like that. But I do think the Bucks a little bit went away from the paint dominance to a little bit more say, you're not going to hit the open threes. You're going to have to beat our defenders to hit shots. And that's, I think, why you close with a guy like Wesley Matthews, who, although he has been good offensively overall in this series, not always going to do that, but they just trust him so much defensively. So it's like him, Giannis, Jrue Holiday, even if we don't have the paint locked down by Brook like usual, because we are closing out on these threes, we trust those guys to clean up whatever they need to. And Jrue showed why that was a good idea to end Game 5.
Yeah, I agree with you that the Bucks have done a pretty good job on Tatum, and a lot of that has been just Wesley Matthews.
Yeah.
I was looking this up earlier this morning. On possessions that Wesley Matthews registers as a defender of Jason Tatum, so not even a direct contest, the Celtics are averaging 0.85 points per possession. Ooh. That is, for anyone at home who doesn't really, that is absolutely terrible, even for this series. So yeah. That's absolutely huge for Milwaukee. So kind of wrapping up the discussion, we lead into Game 6, a potential Game 7. What is your biggest concern for Milwaukee, non-Khris Middleton division, leading into the Game 6 and potential Game 7?
Yeah, I think it's one, I do think there's a chance that we just see a Tatum explosion at some point. It kind of happened a little bit over the last 2 games, but is he going to go for 45 points or something? And do the Celtics get another game where they outscore Milwaukee a lot from 3? I think you look at Game 5, the Bucks end up outscoring the Celtics from Game 3. I don't have the number in front of me, but I imagine in games where the Bucks score more points from 3 than their opponents, they probably have a ridiculously good record, because obviously Giannis is going to add another, few dozen points that aren't threes, and 3 or 6 or whatever that are threes. So I think that's probably the biggest concern now, is just the Bucks continue to play good defense, but the Celtics are just like, we're just going to make shots anyway, which I do trust Milwaukee's defense to not give Boston all like streams of wide open threes anymore. I think that is.
That, would you say, and sorry to interject, like,
no,
that's sort of a Bud doing this? Is that growth? Is that like progress for him?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's there's still a lot of gripes. I think Grayson is still playing too much. I don't think he should have seen fourth quarter minutes, but I do think there's more adjustments than people give him credit for, even if he's still not, Nick Nurse or anything like that, in terms of over adjusting. And I think a lot of what Bud does really well as a coach are things that are pretty impossible to define, the culture and that kind of a stuff, which I really didn't care about, or didn't realize, I guess, didn't think about until after they won, and thought about all the stuff they went through and how many times we've seen teams go through similar things and not hold up as well. So I think that it's hard to define how good of a job Bud does, but I do think in that sense that yes, he is more flexible now, more open to changes. I think now the big test will be, can Javon Carter scrape a couple minutes in here when George Hill
Please.
isn't accomplishing much?
I love
And
Javon Carter, and
he's been so good.
and just like, is George Hill giving you even enough? And I get Javon Carter
No.
is tiny,
Yeah.
but like, look, even just if you don't want Grayson Allen on the court for certain minutes, like Javon Carter is going to give you way more defensive pressure than, I mean, George Hill, yes, but he's going to give you more defensive pressure than Grayson Allen. So can we dust off Javon Carter, please?
That would be great. I think the thing about him too is you throw him out there for 12 minutes or whatever. That's 12 minutes of full court pressure on whoever's bringing the ball up for the Celtics. And I do think outside of getting a steal or a backcourt or whatever, like it just degrades your offensive usefulness if it's harder to get into your action. Less time on the shot clock, everyone's less comfortable. Like that stuff matters. I would certainly like to see him get some run. I think if George Hill does play, put the ball in his hands a little bit more because that's his other advantage over Carter is he's a better, more proven on-ball creator. But the Bucks just used him as an off-ball player, and if you're going to do that, then play Javon, who's shot much better from three this season. It's going to give you more defensively. I think Hill still struggling with like a injured vertebrae in his neck or something.
He's had like it seems like 80 different serious injuries this season.
Yeah, I mean he wants that ring really bad. He wants to win one in Milwaukee. You've got to feel for him, but like Axel Toupon got a ring. George, like you still get one even if you're not playing every game. Like don't let's think about your long-term health a little bit. Like you still help the team, you still deserve it for contributions before the trade for Jrue Holiday. But yeah, I would like to see Javon play. I'd like to see Wes play a little less. And if Khris comes back, that changes then of course how much everyone is going to play. But yeah, I do think Bud has grown a little bit and said a little bit more of we'll go small when we have to. I think the Phoenix series, Bobby Portis was closing out games and they were switching more. And that's like, they never would have done that before. So it's nice to see the Bucks, maybe they ram their heads into a wall a bit still here and there, especially offensively, but I think defensively, I'd say a little bit less so. Although the shots they gave to Al in game 4 absolutely made me sick. So I shouldn't get too far in praising their adaptiveness.
I'm with you though that it seems like it's even like some of the minutes that Bud has been playing where we're talking about, could you cut down Wesley Matthews minutes? Bud like 2 years ago might have had him at a 15-minute cap or something. Who knows?
I don't even want to talk about that bubble Miami series.
You meant the Javon Carter point you made about his full court pressure, and I didn't look at the data of how often they ran this, but like that would be sort of another option to neutralize. And it's a pick and roll combination everyone has trouble defending, but like a Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart pick and roll, Javon Carter, if you want to use Giannis and Jrue Holiday to defend that action, yes, that is optimal.
That works.
You don't always want to use Giannis to do that, but also Javon Carter just sort of maybe bumping them out of that offense a little bit by giving you that full court pressure. And look, you got 6 fouls too. Let him use them, and you can slow down the game and maybe help your players catch a breath that way. I'm curious who you think needs to, if we assume Khris Middleton doesn't play, who is the third most important Buck?
I mean, so it's tough. I think in terms of importance to the team, I think it might be a different answer. But in terms of importance as in what version of them is going to show up, I think it's Bobby Portis. Just because, I just think we know what we're getting from Wes Matthews and Pat Connaughton. And they are super important. Again, they're both locked-in closers, which I think is hilarious because 2 months ago, maybe today, if you asked a bunch of random NBA fans, what do you think about Pat Connaughton and Wesley Matthews closing games? They'd probably be like, that team must stink. But they're quite good, and they've been really good on both ends. Wes more than Pat on defense, but certainly Pat more on offense. But I think Bobby Portis, can he continue to be a closer, a fifth guy who holds up on both ends? And how much different is this game, even this last game, if he's 8 of 14 instead of 4 for 14, right? Can he give you that rebounding and holding up defensively? He's not going to be great, but can he continue to hold up there, get you some extra possessions on offense, and score more effectively? I think that could be a big difference for the Bucks. I mean, he has not had a 3-point shot over these last few games. I think if he comes out, plays really well, is knocking down some threes, that could be huge for Milwaukee. So I'll say Bobby Portis with the caveat that Wes Matthews for the defense on Tatum and the spacing and offensive punch, which has been really nice these last couple games, and Pat Connaughton, who's just always been their most reliable two-way wing outside of Khris. I think those guys are obviously super important as well.
It's Bobby Portis. You mentioned his defense. You probably have 2 of the most underrated switch defenders in this series in Grant Williams and Bobby Portis. I think Grant Williams is noticeably better than Bobby Portis, but
totally.
Ever since the middle of last year or whatever, Bobby Portis has been fine on switches, which is just not like, I don't know if it gets talked about enough. That's my 10,000 foot view. I'd probably pick Wes as the third most important Buck because you already laid it out, the responsibility he has with Tatum. And I didn't really subscribe to the idea that Boston needed to get a floor general type over the offseason. And now I'm watching this series. And if you can really rough up Jason Tatum or make life difficult on him, he and Marcus Smart together, like, yes, you can run your offense that way. Al Horford's a good playmaker. Robert Williams III is a good stationary playmaker. Derek White's a good connective passer. The more I watch this series, and I actually am curious as your thoughts now that you've watched the series very intimately, is that something Boston could actually benefit from? It's not, oh, they need a star point guard. They need sort of a floor general who can delineate touches, especially down the stretch of a game like we just saw, where it felt like they were, this is the cliche of all sports cliches, it felt like they were protecting their lead or afraid to lose rather than like they were just going through their stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as excellent as Smart has been at times in this series, and I think he's getting killed too much for the end of game 5, there was a little bit of like, holy crap, the ball is in Marcus Smart's hands a ton offensively in the last minute of this important game when the lead is going away and things are happening. I mean, I don't know if you could identify any moment where he truly made the wrong decision. I mean, the drive that ended up Giannis getting that I think led to the Jrue 3, that one was pretty bad. But like, the steal that Jrue made, I think he just fumbled a little bit, and Jrue was there before he had any chance to get the ball to Tatum. And the drive on that play where Jrue blocked it, it's like somebody had to do something. And,
everyone's like, oh, he should know the Bucks' base defense. Why would you go towards the rim? And I'm like, who is able to process all of that in real time? Pat Connaughton, you talked about this a little bit on your pod. John Showman pointed it out on Twitter. Pat Connaughton blew up that ATO. Yeah. And yes, there was a different way to do it. But like, he blew it up so much that Jason Tatum like didn't even start to come off of the Al Horford pin down. And did Jason Tatum just know that Marcus Smart was doing the wrong thing? You would have to, I guess I wasn't watching that closely enough. That was kudos to Pat Connaughton. So I'm with you. I thought he got too much shit for what happened. I mean, he was bad. So was the rest of the Celtics team.
Yeah, I mean, no one else did anything. And that I think, to your point, though, that is the point, right? In terms of, I think they could use someone. I think the Bucks could kind of use a player like this too, to be quite honest, especially with Khris out. Jrue and Giannis sometimes aren't. I think Giannis is really good decision maker and passer, but all the work he does scoring, you don't want him also bringing the ball up to initiate offense for other guys. I mean, if you watch them, they sometimes, especially like earlier in a fourth quarter, not when it's real crunch time, he'll just be like kind of off to the side some of these possessions. That's just him resting. Like, he needs that with the energy he exerts. I think that's another kind of the reason I'd like to see JEVON play a little bit is Jevon Carter. Like, Marcus Smart has dealt with like 15 injuries this series. And I remember, I think it was before he missed game 2, and they've like got him bringing up the ball still, and Jrue is covering him, and Jrue is picking him up at like 3/4 court. And it's like, you're really making Marcus Smart with like a bad arm bring up the ball against Jrue full court? Like, that sounds like absolute hell. And with a better arm, it didn't work out well for the Celtics to end game 5. So I do think they could use another playmaker like that for sure, as could Milwaukee, as could a lot of teams. There aren't that many point guards out there, unfortunately. But I think that has shown, and that is another reason I like the ball pressure early to kind of just, again, further gum up what Boston is doing.
And I'll wrap up this discussion here with if the Celtics win game 6, why are they winning game 6? Or why are they even coming back in this series? Is it something you noticed about they've done for long stretches, for games at a time, of keeping Milwaukee, limiting their transition opportunities? Is there something you've noticed that they've been able to do? Is there something that you look at them that they could do leading into game 6, the rest of this series, that you think could continue to throw the Bucks off kilter? Because look, they basically controlled most of game 5. And so like, we could very easily be talking about the Bucks going into this winner go home game rather than the Celtics.
Yeah, I think honestly what it's going to come down to, and not to, oversimplify or not dive in too much here, but it's something you said earlier. Giannis is going to impose his will. I just have no doubt about that. Will the players around him make too many mistakes or miss too many opportunities? Because I think there's going to be shots there. I think there's going to be good looks there. And also, the 8, 7, maybe less than 7 in game 6, the minutes he's not on the court, how bad will those be? But I think really it's like everyone around Giannis, because you just trust that Giannis will come out here, probably around 40 points, double-digit rebounds, a good number of assists if guys are making shots. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, can the Celtics crowd the paint and hold him off? And Do the other Bucks not make you pay? Do they absolutely get immolated in the non-Giannis minutes? I think those are going to be the big questions, which is ironic because goes back to like the Eric Bledsoe days. I mean, this has kind of always been the question for the Bucks is, can everybody else do enough? The signs from guys like Pat Connaughton, Wesley Matthews have been good, but can we get, even though he shoots 4 for 7 from deep, can we get a better than 9 for 24 game from Jrue Holiday? Can we get better than 4 for 14 from Portis? Those are going to be, I think, the questions. And I do think if Milwaukee gets a better scoring game from Jrue, a more complete one, a more sound one, and 2, 3 maybe of those role players have solid offensive games, I think it's going to be really hard to beat the Bucks in Fiserv here for the Celtics. As good as their defense is, there's just not really a defense out there that can take away Giannis one-on-one. And then if you're not able to do that, you're either giving him too much or giving everybody else too much. So I do think if the Bucks can execute around Giannis, this series should be theirs for the taking, but a lot of work left to do against a very, very good Celtics team.
How do you think this series ends? What's your prediction?
It's got to be Bucks in 6. I mean,
Brandon Jennings decreed it years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I asked him the follow-up question was with the herd, Bucks in 6 always. That's for the culture is what he said. He also said, what am I supposed to say? We're going to lose in 4? I mean, what else can you say? And I was like, it's a good point. I don't know what else you could say, Brandon. But yeah, I think Bucks in 6. I said that before the series. I certainly didn't see it playing out the way it has. It's been, we talked about before we started recording, such an exciting up and down series. But that's very Bucksian too, to get the Bucks in 6 result while also making you question your existence like 3 times on the way there.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Game 7, just as the impartial observer, because I love chaos. Yeah. I will say, though, and I don't know if I'm getting too caught up in the moment, because I said Dallas was, and I picked them to lose in 5 to the Suns anyway, so I was missing the mark, but I thought Phoenix obliterated their soul in Game 2, and I just thought that series was over. I'm getting like that vibe again, where it was just like, if this is the Celtics, where they haven't really progressed enough from the past couple of years, they're over. They're finished. But I'm just not sure if recency bias is kicking in here. Their responses after the game I thought were mostly great. I give players credit for being able to, like, after these super emotional losses or victories and have to give these even-keeled answers, because my first instinct would be like, what are you expecting Jason Tatum to say? He's supposed to be sad that they lost and that we're going to lose or throw Marcus Smart on the bus. But I'm like, in the heat of the moment, like, maybe. But even Giannis the other night where they lost Game 4, he was like, we got to go out. We'll win Game 5. If we don't win Game 5, then we'll have to try and win Game 6. I'm just like, I applaud these players for being able to keep their composure under these circumstances, because I absolutely would not. I'm like having panic and anxiety attacks over trying to figure out what's happening to the series by game basis.
Giannis is such a machine. I love him. I'll never be able to relate to him for the way he processes these moments, which is why he's, a great player, on pace to be an all-time great player. After the game, they're talking about, your eye is bleeding. They did the post-game interview on the court, and he's just like, yeah, it was tough, but I'm good. It's like, that's basically all he'll say ever. Sometimes he gets introspective. That's more before a game. In the finals, that great quote was before a game, I believe, about you live in the past, that's your ego, etc. Yeah. But yeah, I think credit to the Boston. I don't think it's going to be an easy Game 6. I'm not trying to write off Boston by any means. No game, really, maybe Game 1, but not really any game has been easy for the Bucks. But I just think they find ways to do it, and that's what they've been doing for a little over a year now. So I'm just going to ride with them.
I did want to touch on this, even though it's been an exhausted topic, as someone who covers Giannis Antetokounmpo. What have you made of the MVP discourse, even predating the actual announcement that Nikola Jokic had won it back-to-back?
Yeah, we all knew, right? We had known for a while, I think, with the amount of tabulated ballots that were released publicly. I know it's not definitive, but I think everyone kind of knew.
I mean, it's basically become like the Woj and Shams announcing the draft picks before they're actually called. We just know who wins all these awards based on the straw polls that are out there. Yeah,
exactly. I was furious. Joker's a fake. No, I'm kidding. I thought Nikola Jokic was
the creation of the spreadsheet dweebs.
Yeah. No, that's the stupidest thing. Like, you can look at the most basic of stats. Jokic clearly rocks in all of them. Like, this is not, screen assists or warp per 36 or whatever. Like, it's very obvious what he does. Like, you don't need any of these things. Like, you can throw out all the schlorps, as Zach Lowe would say. It's very easy to tell that Nikola Jokic rocks. I thought the records thing was overblown. I thought any of Giannis, Embiid, Jokic were deserving. I do think Giannis should have finished ahead of Embiid. That's my hottest MVP take.
I had him ahead of Embiid on my hypothetical ballot, if that's any consolation.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought the way that both of those teams ended the season, it was better for Giannis. Although I think Giannis had a sliver of a chance after the Sixers and Nets wins the same week. And then they like implode versus Dallas and just had a pretty meh end of the season from there. So, I just think because of Brooks' injury and because of the run they had prior to this season, Milwaukee kind of was just like, let's just get through it. Like, let's just survive this regular season, have a good enough seed, and we'll go. Well, we know what really matters here, right? Is the playoffs. It's unfortunate. I think regular season stuff matters, but for Milwaukee in particular, it's not their goal. And I think Lopez not being there really hurt their defense, which also hurt Giannis's DPOY case. So I kind of went through the whole year like, yeah, he's probably not going to get anything except first team All NBA, which is fine. There's a lot of great players in the league, and the Bucks are really not all that fun story this year. Watching them every game, it was like, oh my God, they have so many stinkers. Their defense isn't good. Like, it's very meh. So I thought Jokic was a deserving winner. I think he's going to now suffer from the Giannis thing. I don't think he'll touch another one until he has more postseason success. I think, you win and then get swept out of the playoffs twice. It's not his fault by any means. The Nuggets are a hospital unit right now. But I do think he's now going to suffer from that same deal of like, he probably just won't win again until he can go, win a finals or have another gutsy playoff performance, which he has done before. But I do think he'll probably suffer from that now. And someone like Embiid or Luka, or maybe Giannis, will have a shot next year.
And there's not a furor over that, where it's like we just know that voter fatigue exists. Because how many MVPs would LeBron have if there wasn't voter fatigue?
Right.
And that's just a matter of fact. I can't stand I'm with you on everything you said too. I've seen people compare this. Oh, we're going to look back like we did with Westbrook in 2017 and say that he was just like given this artificial bump. I don't think it's going to be the case because of everything you outlined, where I feel like most of the level-headed people were transparent that it could be Embiid, Jokic, Giannis. A lot of this comes down to a matter of preference. A lot of it comes down to splitting already split hairs. What I just can't stand is people saying, oh, well, you're focusing on the numbers too much. Watch the games. And then their inclination is just to cite the numbers of seeds or the number of victories that a team has. Wins aren't a player stat. Like they're not a player stat. And as you mentioned, like the gap in victories here was just so small between Giannis and Embiid's teams and then Jokic's Nuggets teams. I don't understand the uproar. And if you're angry that he's eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, that's another thing I don't get. Because it's like, why does it matter that Joel Embiid, he helped the Sixers survive without Ben Simmons, but Jokic helps the Nuggets survive without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., but because they have 0 All-Star appearances under their belt, it's different. I want to know how many people leading into this season would have been inclined to say that a healthy Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. would have been better than Ben Simmons, given the playoff series he just had last year. And I'm wondering if this would my solution here. And look, if people want a different panel of voters, I do think it's a joke. Some of the people that have votes, I do think
some of the ballots are. I mean, I don't know his name. I don't want to call out someone too specifically, but the Drummond for DPOY
Greg Logan of Newsday. I've seen him in person. He's exactly the type of person you would think that he is. So I have no problem calling him out. It's that stuff, and there are people who put a lot of effort into it, and I have so much respect for beat writers. I also have so much respect for just localized coverage in general. But like, do these people, the ones that are especially traveling, where you and I are doing our job from afar at this point, can probably chopper in for more of these games across different markets? How many of these beat writers for specific teams have the time necessary to, and I'm not saying pull any of their votes. I'm just saying like that could lead to inherently flawed. And there are people who are talking heads on TV that are tasked with covering every single sport under the sun. Like, do they have? So if you have a problem with the voting process, the fact that there are incentives and max eligibilities tied to all this, it makes me super cringy. And if I had a real vote, I wouldn't actually want the real vote because it would make me feel dirty there. I am wondering though, would having postseason specific awards change this at all? Like, would it sort of make it more easier to accept the results that we're seeing in the regular season?
Yeah, I think so. And it seems like they're going that way. Now they just announced some more trophies for like playoff finishers. And is there a player one too now? The Larry Bird and Magic one? I don't remember if that's just for, I think it might just be for the conference champ in general. But I think I've seen this idea in the last couple of days. I think they should do an all playoffs team. I think if you look, whether it's March Madness. Yeah, they did all bubble team. They do March Madness. I think does all teams, all NCAA tournament or whatever they call it. Actually, Euro League I think does an all team. Right, the Olympics I think does one. I think the NBA playoffs is like the only major basketball tournament that does not release an all playoffs team afterward. I think you could do two of them honestly, first and second team. I would say no positions because I think that doesn't help anyone at all. But I do think that they should do that, and there should be more recognition outside of only Finals MVP and obviously the championship. And just the last thing on Jokic, I mean, I think a fun game for anyone who thinks he's not deserving at 48 wins, 3 less than the Sixers and the Bucks, is go down the rosters of the Sixers and the Bucks and find the worst player who would be Jokic's best teammate. And I think you're going at least 2 or 3 or more players down in both cases, with Murray and Michael Porter out for so much of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, look, this is splitting hairs, but it's like you can even just look at the top. Like Giannis had Khris Middleton and Jrue. And then Embiid did get James Harden at midseason, not the James Harden they thought they were going to get.
They had Tyrese Maxey all year, and he had a hell of a season.
Right. And look, that might not be the way to look at the MVP. And if that is the case, like then there needs to be a sort of a set of criteria, a minutes threshold, trying to define value. I think the NBA enjoys that the ambiguity of the valuable part of this creates the debate. I would love to see postseason awards though. And let's also, I don't know if this would help, but I think it would make the discussion more salient. Like let's carve out some kind of a gap between when the votes are due and the start of the playoffs. And let's let everything just trickle out then rather than during the postseason.
It's so stupid the way they do it now.
And it is a bad, I don't want to say it's a bad look, but it does give fuel to the idiots who want to argue that Jokic was eliminated in the first round and he's the MVP when you're actually naming him the MVP after he was eliminated in the first round.
Well, it also what is the argument against being able to honor the player at a home playoff game? Which certainly for the MVP, they're always going to be in the first round. We're never going to see an MVP who doesn't make the first round. That if Jokic didn't make the playoffs, I would be on board saying, yeah, he can't be MVP. I think that is a fair threshold, and that I don't think that needs to be codified. Maybe it should be. I don't think it has to be. I don't think it would ever happen. But that makes so much sense. Game one, or whatever your first home playoff game is, all of the fans there can celebrate the award with you. That makes so much more sense than, the cool video of Jokic on a horse. Jokic on a horse content rules, but it should be with the fans where the guy plays. It makes so much sense. And they're just like, no, we need to roll it out slowly during the playoffs so that we can do our stupid award show that no one watches. And I'm sorry, I'm sure a lot of people put a lot of work into the award show. Everyone knows the awards.
It's not a thing anymore. Didn't they get rid of it?
They don't. Do they not do it at all now?
That's why they've trickled out.
Oh, that's why they just roll it out now.
And
okay.
I appreciated the attempt by them to try that, but it was just very clear after the first one, like no one even cares about this anymore because we just watched the NBA Finals and now
it's over. Yeah.
Ti, this was great. Thank you so much for hopping on. Are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you do?
I sure am. That's one of the only things I'm consistently able to do. At Ti Windisch on Twitter, TiWindisch, and then Gyro Step Podcast Network. That's GYRO Step. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, including this fine podcast, and on YouTube, which you can also find, I believe, this fine podcast on YouTube. We just hit 1,000 subs, which is a big deal.
Congrats.
Thank you. We can monetize. So we've been telling everyone we need to secure the bag. Help us out.
It's a very tiny bag, but everyone, please go give it to them.
Yeah, well, we're not there yet. We have to, our AdSense account is linking. There's a lot of stuff still happening apparently, but we're working on it. But very happy to get there. And thanks everyone for the support on that. And then I have little merch on Eurostep shirt, GSPN store.com has all of our merch as well. But yeah, we're covering all things Bucks all the time, and then do some more Brewers when that's over on our new Milwaukee Brewers podcast.
They are building a conglomerate, a budding giant over at the Eurostep Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at the Eurostep Podcast, spelled exactly as it sounds, unless you think it sounds different. That's GYRO Step Podcast. Ti, thank you so much. As I'm sure you know by now, I will be pestering you again in the near future.
Can't wait, man. Thanks for having me again.